Hey, it's Bernadette. Welcome. How are you? So today we're going to talk about the five signs you're suffering from an unexpected crisis. Even if you had an unexpected crisis that happened months ago or years ago, I'm going to tell you the five signs that you're still suffering or you're still stuck there long after the crisis has passed, and then give you the five reasons why we get stuck after a crisis has passed and what we can do about it. Okay. So I want to give you a moment to get here. I'm going to share the post. Not usually on this time of day, but here I am. So say hello when you get here, whether you're watching the replay or you're here live. That way I know that you can hear me and that the feed is coming through. So say hello, tell me where you're from, and then we'll dive in. But just now that it's populating, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. So wherever you're tuning in from, say hello so that I can say hello back. And if you're watching the replay, I always come back and check the comments, and I always love to see where you guys are. So I hope you're having a good day. Today's Tuesday, right? It's Tuesday. I should know this. Time is speeding past so fast that it's hard to keep up. So let's dive in. Here's the five signs that you're suffering from an unexpected crisis after the crisis is over. Okay. It's hard to recognize sometimes. I think we don't realize. We think a crisis happens, an unexpected crisis happens, whether that's you get sick, somebody gets sick, you take a financial hit, whatever it is, all of a sudden you have to move, right? I've had clients, we've had people come in and work with me that their house has caught fire. Like nobody wants car accidents where you may think of it as an accident. It's still a crisis. Your body goes into crisis mode. Now you have to figure out a different transportation mode, like all kinds of things. Job loss, that's a crisis, right? So first I want to help you identify what constitutes a crisis. A crisis is anything that puts you in the mode of having to solve something and get to safety, survive something right now. We can experience unexpected crisis when a relationship suddenly ends, when a job puts you in layoff, when an unexpected bill comes out of the blue and you're like, how do I pay for that? So put yes in the comments if you have and can resonate with, like, you have experienced a crisis, maybe not a huge crisis or what you thought was a huge crisis. We do this weird thing. I don't know why as humans we do this. Like we do this weird thing where we kind of diminish the effects of how something affects us. Say, like, you get sick and you're knocked down for a month. And we all saw this. Like all of us were dealt with the COVID crisis, the crisis of lockdown. Everybody did. It was worldwide. It was a global pandemic. And here's the reality. Okay. Many people are still suffering from the effects of dealing with that crisis, because what did it do? It put us in a place where we could no longer shop the same. We couldn't go to work the same. Lots of people lost their jobs. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because I'm seeing the after effects still affecting people in a really, really detrimental way. And then because it's been over for a while, like lockdown's been lifted, travel is back. You can go to the grocery store. You don't have to show some vaccine passport or wear a mask or whatever. Like we can take part in our normal activities. We think, well, the crisis is over. I shouldn't be stuck. I shouldn't be suffering. I shouldn't be experiencing weird symptoms of survival mode. Say yes in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. You guys know I love dialogue, conversation, engagement, rather than just being a talking head on your screen. And I need to know that this stream is coming through for this reason. We just had, for a week now, but today, like a couple hours ago, we had a massive thunderstorm, and it absolutely looks like it's coming again. It was just sunny outside 10 minutes ago. I live in Texas, and now here comes the clouds. And I mean, the last storm, all of a sudden, thunder, lightning. If that happens, I'm going to have to jump off. I promise that I will come back on a day it's not raining and finish the stream if that happens. I'm just giving you a warning. Ashley's saying yes. Okay, so you've experienced and you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So again, we all went through the COVID crisis, right? All of a sudden, you can't go to work. You have to be 6 feet away from people. You can't go visit your family if you're not in the same household. Like that threw the entire world into crisis. Annette is saying, I still feel traumatized seeing people in masks. Yeah. And you would if it's not normal for you, right? Like in Asian countries, it's fairly normal. People wear masks all the time. If you go to Hawaii, down in Waikiki Beach, where it's all the touristy, high-end shops, the Gucci, the Coach, and all those, you'll see all of the Asians typically that come off the big tourist buses are wearing masks. So in areas like that, it didn't traumatize them. But with the world experiencing this global pandemic and every day on the news, people are dying and oh my God, we don't know what to do. Shortages of food, shortages of toilet paper. I mean, that was and is the best example for unexpected crisis. And because we all went through it on a global scale, I can relate a lot of this to that. But it's not the only crisis that we go through. Literally, you can have an unexpected loss of a relationship and it creates massive crisis for you. Why? Changes your financial status all of a sudden, right? You don't have 2 incomes, you have 1 if you're living with someone or you're married. You can have an unexpected health diagnosis that now I have to deal with this and I can't put all my focus into work and the kids and the house and the things. And you are in crisis mode trying to deal with handling and coming up with a solution to end the crisis. You can get into an argument with somebody like so easy to do on social media. Join Nextdoor. You will see exactly what I'm talking about if you're in America. Oh my God, so much argument and fighting. And it puts us into that mode of defense. And I got to solve this. I have to end this. And your adrenaline pumps. The good thing about some of the positive parts of being in crisis is your mind actually will look for solutions, right? You will go looking for solutions if you're positive focused. We will get stuck, however, and you guys all saw this with the COVID thing, right? They kept talking about it on the news, like COVID burnout. Everybody was tired of staying home. Everybody was tired of getting stuck, not being able to go shopping, not being able to see family. It began to feel like a prison. Sorry about that. I got my dogs locked in. The lockdown pulled the aggression out of people. It pulled a lot of stuff out of people. It pulled, it put us into separation mode, put us into blame mode. We always want to find out who's at fault. In the middle of a crisis, it's like, who's to blame? Who's going to be held responsible? Because whoever's held responsible now has to fix it. Like, we don't want to fix it ourselves. We want to put the blame outside of ourselves. When we go there, we're literally giving our power away. And I watched it happen. You guys probably did too. And you may have done it yourself. I know in a certain level, when we couldn't travel and I had to buy a house, thankfully in Texas, I was able to go from Washington to Texas at the beginning of the pandemic. And then we were able to move at the beginning of the pandemic, literally flew to Texas in May of 2020 and then moved here in the end of May and then moved here in July, a month later, like it was the end of May. But there was that whole initial in the middle of the crisis. Oh my God, we have to move. My landlord's like, you either sign a new lease for a year or you move out. And I'm like, I'm not staying here. I don't want to be here. We don't want to buy a house here, but we're looking at buying a house, just not here. And I'm like, forget it. I'm going to go. I do well in crisis because I've had so many crises and I can recognize, and then I have a plan, an exit plan and regeneration plan after the crisis has passed. Most people don't, which is why you get stuck. So here's the 5 signs: persistent negative emotions and thoughts, right? If you the sign number one that you're suffering still from being in crisis, from experiencing an unexpected crisis, the first sign is that you experience and are stuck in persistent negative thoughts and emotions that you cannot get out of. And it doesn't have to do with the crisis. It's just everything now. The filter has become very negative, and you see problems, you don't see blessings, you see a lot of things that make you sad, make you feel shameful, make you anxious. That's the first sign that you're still suffering as a result of the unexpected crisis. The second sign is that you have lack of motivation and interest in things that normally you would be interested in. Put it in the chat, or raise your hand in the chat. Like, put the little hand emoji up if this is you. And there have been studies done in the last 6 months to a year, recent studies of how many people feel apathetic and lethargic, have lack of motivation and lack of interest in things that they used to be interested in, gave them joy. They have no motivation, right? We kind of fall into this weird decrease of joy and enthusiasm. That's the second symptom or sign that you're still suffering as a result of an unexpected crisis, because your body, your mind is stuck still in crisis mode. Third sign, withdrawal, social withdrawal, isolating. And whether it's a global pandemic, we were forced into social withdrawal, or you go through a massive stressor like a breakup or a job loss or a health issue, or financial struggles, we tend to pull back and isolate. We withdraw socially. And when you stay in that position long after the crisis has passed, it's a sign that you're still in the crisis mode, even if the crisis isn't happening. Ashley's raising her hand. Thank you. Yeah. A lot of people I talk to are still in that place, don't know how to re-engage, don't know how to pull themselves back out. And part of it is that you just haven't processed all the way through that crisis. When we have a crisis hit, we have to deal with what's at hand right now, right? When we're in it, we're in it. And our main focus is surviving. Your subconscious, your ego, its whole focus is to keep you alive. And when you're in a crisis like that, your whole focus goes to, and the landscape, all the rules change like it did during the pandemic. It's all about survival. So same thing, you go through a massive relationship downfall or a job loss or something like, your whole thing is about survival. So you're pushing, and you're not necessarily paying attention consciously to everything that you're thinking and doing. You're just trying to get to safety. It's kind of like being out in the middle of the ocean, right? You're not thinking about anything other than keep paddling, make it to shore, literally looking for survival. And even once you get to shore, if you're still in a state of like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Another wave, another threat, another storm, you're stuck in that crisis mode. And a lot of people are there right now. I see a lot of people, not just from the pandemic, right? And I'll tell you why, because I really want you guys to understand why people get stuck there, so that there's no shame, there's no self-judgment, there's no condemnation, and you can start to get yourself unstuck. The fourth sign that you're suffering after unexpected crisis and you're still stuck in crisis mode is that you're neglecting certain aspects of your self-care, and like your physical health, your mental health, right? You're neglecting things like your diet, your sleep. You're no longer taking care of yourself at the level you were pre-crisis. Does that make sense? Different aspects, whether it be exercise or eating healthy. When we go through a crisis, I remember a few years ago, it was a couple years ago, my girlfriend was murdered in Colorado. I got the call on New Year's Day, like it all of a sudden. And within 45 minutes, I went into crisis mode immediately when her kids called me. We don't know where she is, what's going on. And then an hour later, she was found dead. It was a whole long thing, but I only had 45 minutes to prepare. And in that 45 minutes from that phone call on, I was in crisis mode and stayed there for a good 10 days as I went and helped her kids deal with the fallout from her death and dealing with the funeral arrangements, the police, the resources for the kids, the bank stuff, the will, the house, all the stuff threw me into crisis. And if I didn't have a plan for how I was going to process through my own grief, because I did not sit in that grief during this. We had to hold a memorial. I had to take care. I had to keep my head on me for the family. I'm good in crisis, and some of you are too, but that's not nearly as important as, are you good at what it takes after crisis so that you can pull your body out of crisis, your central nervous system out of crisis, your mind out of crisis mode, and get back to calm. Hi, Miss Cardamancy on YouTube. What ends up happening when we're in that crisis, like I said, when I went to go take care of my friend's family, this was not a planned trip. This is last minute. Me and my daughter packed the car, gassed it up, and we were gone within 45 minutes for a 12-hour drive to Colorado from Texas to go take care of everything. There was no food planned out. So what did we do? We ate like crap. We ate what we could. We ate a lot of fast food. We stayed in a hotel, and you're running places and doing things and learning things on the fly, which is a lot of you have experienced. If you've, gone through any type of crisis, you're dealing with things in the moment, right? Makes you really present to what's happening in the moment. But if it's not something to do with the immediate crisis, you forget, like eating healthy, your sleep goes to hell. My sleep patterns got all messed up. And it took me a long time to get my body back on track, my sleep cycle back on track. And some people don't. Some people, they know, okay, well, these things change. My diet changed, my sleep changed. I'm not taking care of myself the same. I've got all this baggage now I'm carrying internally from that crisis, and they don't know how to process out, and it ends up creating more suffering long, long after the crisis passed. And then the final sign that you're still suffering as a result of an unexpected crisis is the inability to find meaning and purpose in your life. So again, raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about, or if that's you. And what I mean by that is that you face this crisis and you face this hardship, and it was all about survival. But then once it's over, there's a dullness that happens in your filter of how you see the world. Like, things don't look as shiny. And I know this to be true globally, just from the research that's been done since the pandemic. Right? Sometimes when we get the carpet ripped out from underneath us, we can get stuck in this place of giving everything a negative meaning, or being afraid to pursue our dreams, our hopes, because what's the point, right? You become very pessimistic. What's the point? There's no meaning. There's no purpose. Someone's just going to pull the rug out again. If you've been through an unexpected crisis and you have more than one, two of those signs, persistent negative thoughts and emotions, lack of motivation and interest, you've withdrawn socially, you've isolated yourself, you've neglected your self-care, and now you don't have an ability to find meaning and purpose. If you have any of those, or a combination of them, right, and it's gone on for a while, and yes, it either came from the pandemic or another crisis that happened in my life since the ending of the lockdown, then pay attention, right? Pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. There's no shame here. Like, there's no reason to beat yourself up at all. We all go through it. The problem is you can get stuck in that survivor mode as if the crisis is still happening, even though it's not logically. Your mind, your body has not processed through it enough to release it. And so now we're stuck here, we're stagnant. And that can show up in so many different ways where like health it becomes an issue, you're grouchy in your relationships, your finances plateau, any number of ways that you can recognize, oh, okay, let me see, do I have these symptoms? Because yes, I'm experiencing that. The reason that we get stuck there is because we don't have adequate coping mechanisms. We haven't adequately been trained healthy coping mechanisms. Like I said, there's no shame. It's not your fault. And what I mean by that is, how do you deal with the intensity of the emotions that come up during a crisis? Especially unexpected, the way that we all had to deal with it. This all of a sudden loss and separation, this all of a sudden, now I have to think about the store's not going to be open tomorrow, right? All of a sudden, I don't have the income and the assuredness that my job is going to be there because companies were closing left and right during COVID. And I'm not just tying this to COVID. That's the easiest one I can look at globally so that you guys can relate to this. Like I said, it can have to do with anything: sudden loss and death of somebody, the loss of a relationship, anything that's just unexpected, and boom, now you have to deal with it. It throws your life into chaos for a minute. When an unexpected crisis happens and you don't have healthy coping mechanisms, what can happen is you go into things like overeating to fill that, make yourself feel full and to kind of numb the emotions. Drinking, smoking weed, taking pills, going to the doctor, getting medication for anxiety, depression. And honestly, you're going to see some posts coming up in the next week all about anxiety and medication and how it literally it's numbing your alarm system in your body. When we do this dance of trying to get out of crisis by just reaching for the first thing that's going to numb that intensity of emotions, it will lock us into a pattern. So if you do recognize, yeah, I've been in crisis mode still, and no, I didn't and don't have adequate and healthy coping mechanisms, you're not alone. But pay attention to the rest of the list. The other reason you get stuck is you have a lack of a support system, healthy support system, right? Meaning people that are there to assist you, that are there to talk to you, that are there to listen to you. You don't have a healthy support system to help you navigate the stress of that crisis. We all need other people in order to get beyond a crisis. We aren't meant to be islands. We have to have engagement, communication, nurturing from others, right? We're not lone wolves. And if you've become one, like I said, if you've isolated, there's a missing element there that will keep you in that mode of crisis. And it literally, your ego latches onto that. Anytime you're in survival mode and crisis mode, and it's not a conscious choice, right? Your ego will latch onto that. And in that place, when ego's in charge, you're not consciously creating. You're not in control of your life. You're just reacting to circumstances. You go autopilot and in default mode, and oh my God, right? It's one crisis after another. And maybe you even manufacture crisis because that's what you're used to. That's what you're locked into. That's the pattern energetically, emotionally, mentally you're stuck in. You're going to draw more things to have a crisis over. I'm not here to blame you, and I don't want you to think that. I lived my life like this the first half of my life. I mean, I came from an abusive childhood. I had to heal myself, but it was like one crisis after another. It became commonplace for me. And if there wasn't a crisis, it felt like something was wrong. So inevitably, I, would attract to me dramas and other crises. And in a lot of ways, my comfort zone was living in crisis mode. I felt like, well, I'm resilient and I'm strong. Put that in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. You don't have to admit to anything. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm telling you that was me. I've worked with a lot of people and seen a lot of people in that mode, that their whole lives have been one crisis after another. And they become the crisis control manager of their lives and everybody else's, right? Still survival mode. Just so you know, still survivor mode until you process all the way through your trauma caused by the crisis. All right, so we have inadequate coping mechanisms, lack of support. The third reason we get stuck is we get post-traumatic stress disorder. If it's chronic, if you've had it, more than one crisis like I had growing up, and then it was one crisis after another, stuck in survival mode, I had chronic PTSD. We didn't have a label for this. Like, I was born in the 60s. There was no label for PTSD. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Cardamancy, I know you know what I'm talking about. There was no label for it. We had no definition for it. It was a way of life. And if you have PTSD and you have not gotten the tools to process through that and heal that, you'll stay in that mode. You'll suffer continuously. Belief systems, another way that we get stuck. We develop beliefs to protect ourselves from future crisis. Avoidance, denial, those are other things that will, like, if we do not face what happened and we do not process it and we go into denial over how bad it was, how bad it made us feel, what it did to us, same thing, you'll get locked in. Cardamancy's saying exactly, yeah, a lot of things we didn't have labels for, words for. And then finally, the last reason that we get stuck in that place of struggle after a crisis, unexpected crisis, is we hit burnout, right? We hit this place of overwhelm burnout. The most common thing I hear from people when they come to me for help in my program, Charm Life, when I have my call with them of whether or not they're a right fit, I'll ask them, what's going on for you? Like, how are you feeling? What makes you want to change your life? What's going on for you? The most common thing I hear from people, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burned out, I have anxiety, and it's ruining my life. I can't stop my thoughts. I can't sleep at night. If something goes wrong during the day, I stay up at night for hours rehashing, replaying, right? And I want it to change. I can't live like this anymore. That's the most common, is people just hit this place of burnout. You can't keep going through the struggle of crisis anymore. You can't. That's what I help people with. So fear not. If you recognize yourself in any of this, whether it's the symptoms that you're struggling with crisis, or is a long time ago that you went through some things and you never really processed through it, and you recognize, yeah, I don't have adequate coping skills, and even still don't have a great support system. I always have to deal with it by myself. And yeah, I've got PTSD. And yeah, my belief systems are locked into this pattern of thinking that the world is dangerous and I'm not safe and it's all on me. And I tend to avoid things that are conflicting and sort of minimize what the crisis did to me or my childhood did to me. And now I'm just overwhelmed, burnt out, and oh my God, my life needs to change. Get in touch with me. Send me a DM, send me a message, or find somebody to help you. Okay. The worst thing you can do if you recognize yourself in any of this is do nothing. If you do nothing, you're going to continue to go through this. And I can tell you from personal experience, what ends up happening is your body is internalizing all of it and eventually begins to manifest in physical illness, in physical disease, if you don't deal with it, right? Not to mention the mental stress and the emotional stress. I hope that helps. Does that make sense for you guys? And does it help? How many of you saw yourself in any of the signs that you're still suffering after crisis, whether it was the pandemic or it was some other crisis? Do you recognize yourself in this list? Even if you're watching the replay, but especially if you're live right now, put it in the comments. Thanks, Cardamancy. She can help big time. I appreciate that. Any of you Put in the comments. I'd like to know. And if you're going through a crisis right now, you're in the middle of it, and you're like, well, yeah, I have all that stuff, but I'm in the middle of a crisis right now. Don't wait until the crisis is over before you get the support and the help. You can actually process a crisis as it's unfolding, as you're in it. And that's the healthier way to do it, is in the midst of the crisis, be doing the processing right then. Sometimes we have to wait till after, especially if we're in physical danger, emotional danger. You recognize yourself in some of it. Yeah. So now it's time to learn how to get yourself out of that and clear and release all the past traumas, reprogram your body, your mind, your emotions, your entire system. You reboot it so that you can now come from a place of power. When we stay stuck in a crisis mode, we're literally giving our power over to the event, and it's not even happening anymore, right? But in our minds, and your subconscious mind doesn't know when you see images, right? It doesn't know whether it's happening now. It already happened. It will happen. It just, everything's in the now moment. So if you're stressing about things and you're keeping yourself locked into that pattern, like you were during the crisis, you're keeping yourself there. Your bodies can only react with the same chemical reaction, the same emotional and mental reaction as it does during any other crisis. The body doesn't categorize, the mind doesn't categorize, and the subconscious doesn't categorize. This is the worst crisis than this is. It's all the same. Crisis is crisis. Loss is loss, right? Surviving is surviving. The mind doesn't categorize it. So you're going to experience all the same symptoms, whether it's a big, huge crisis to you, because that's what's happening and the meaning you're giving it, or it's not. Your body, your mind, your emotions are all going to react the same way, literally. If you don't process from crisis to crisis or trauma to trauma, it all becomes this one mishmash of BS, like a muddy mixture of ick. And we carry that around. A lot of people call that baggage, right? And if we don't learn how to let it go, we don't go through the process of letting it go, we don't go through the process of releasing it, forgiving, healing, and moving forward powerfully, we're in service to, or not even service, we're in slavery to the events that have already happened. I don't put you guys into a place of power. And believe me, there were times in my youth that I thought there's no way. There's just too much has happened. I used to say, like, I'm so broken, right? Long before I healed myself. I mean, I'm grateful. It's been over 28 years that I've worked through all of my stuff, and it's been a continual journey. I'm not saying like 28 years ago I healed it all. I'm saying 28 years ago was the biggest breakthroughs that brought me to a place of stability and healing. It's a continual journey. But I'll tell you what, before that, before I discovered my own power, connected to my higher consciousness, and let spirit lead, right? I was a slave to all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stupid stuff. And I did numb stuff out. I was in my 20s. Of course I numbed it out. If you were a kid from the 60s and 70s, that's what you did. That's what we were trained to do. Right, Cardamancy? Don't talk about it. Don't deal with it. Hide it. Numb it. Avoid it. Run from it. And my generation, if you're from my generation, that's what we were trained to do, right? And if you're from my father's generation, y'all were trained to do it too. I know, because I have clients in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Seriously. Like, y'all taught it to us. We are your children. And some of our children have been taught the same thing. It's time to undo all of that. It's time, especially since we've had a global crisis, pandemic-wise. There's a global financial crisis, supposedly. There's always a crisis. It's time that we gain the tools to deal with crisis in a healthy way, so that we don't get locked into that place of powerlessness, that place of depression, that place of anxiety, and we just accept our lot in life and settle for nothing. There's a way to rise above it and move beyond so that you can still have your dreams. You can still have what you want in life. You can have your health. You can have loving relationships, and you don't have to feel like whatever crisis came wiped you out and knocked your feet out from underneath you. And that's just where we are now. I don't want that for any of you. You're more powerful. You're more valuable. Absolutely possible. If you want to come work with me in one of my programs or even one-on-one, just message me and let's talk. I love you guys. I hope this helps. If you know someone that can use this talk, you're like, oh no, I don't see myself in it, but I certainly see that person in it. And I think it could help them because I don't think they recognize that that's what's happened. Share the video. Best way you can do it. Like the video, share the video, comment on the video. It helps the algorithm. Even if you don't know of anyone, here's the deal. Like if you like and comment, the algorithm picks that up and shows it to more people who actually can use the information. And I greatly appreciate it. So have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I hope you guys have a miraculous, blessed week. Now that we've moved beyond the full moon, there's so much goodness to come. Let's get it done.